Shalom and welcome to TBN Israel, the podcast. Today, we're going to talk about everything: the Israeli strike in Qatar, the Qatari response, the international meeting to do something against Israel for this strike, and what will come next out of this.
It turns out the biggest competition taking place in the Middle East right now is who can be the biggest supervillain. And Qatar is fighting against the Iranians to be the new big bad guy.
But, the bad side for them is that they do not have a military. All they can do is to affect us in the diplomatic arena, which they have been doing for more than 20 years successfully, because the public opinion about Israel is just going down more and more and more into the fact that Netanyahu is stating that Israel is about to enter a state of isolation, and we need to basically develop our own defensive capabilities internally in the land of Israel in order to prepare for the next war with Iran, with the Houthis in Yemen, and other threats that are further away from the Palestinian threat in Gaza, in Judea and Samaria, maybe some Syrians and the people in Lebanon.
We're in an intense season, and I think we need to tell people how we got to this moment. We're at a place right now where we're on a full-on diplomatic war against the Qataris, and this all started, this last phase of it started when Israel struck in Doha, Qatar, trying to eliminate the leadership of Hamas that was meeting in the place. This was just about a week ago.
Hey, don't say tried, Mati. Maybe
we eliminated some of the leadership of Hamas.
Listen, I did not see any leader of Hamas speaking. If he's alive, why doesn't he speak? One tweet on the phone.
I'll say it again. We eliminated a to-be-determined list of Hamas leaders.
Okay. Listen, I take also, one arm less of each leader. It's also good for us.
And wait. But
the question is, can they lead this terrorist organization in the future?
No,
it wasn't just a strike.
We're getting into the weeds. Just a second.
Let's break it down.
This all started
Just before we start.
Before we start.
No, it's impossible.
Let me complete a sentence here. Before we start, we need people to subscribe, to like, and to share. And we need this for multiple reasons. One, because Toma won't let us continue with the podcast if we don't. But guys, if you're at home, if you're watching this podcast, we really, really, really need you to like, to share, and subscribe. And the reason is because the whole reason for us doing this is simply because we want the truth about what happens here in the world to get to people everywhere around the world. And the only way to make that happen with the way YouTube and other social media platforms work is if people like, share, and subscribe. You think it doesn't make a difference? It makes an unbelievable difference. If you do that every time you watch, it just makes an unbelievable difference in getting this message out to many more people. Most of the viewers of our content are not subscribers of our channel.
Yeah,
they're people that YouTube says, we think this person might like the content. Let's send them the content.
But some of our viewers, especially one of them from Germany, is here with us in the studio today in the podcast.
Welcome
live. He just landed in Israel, I think today, a few hours ago, and he came here to visit us in person. This is something we encourage you guys to do. And girls, everybody who's coming here into Israel, give us a call, email, leave a comment, and come visit us in person. We'll love to meet you. Yeah. But let's break it down. Okay, Israel strike in Doha, Qatar, targeting the leadership of Qatar.
Yes.
Okay? Qatar got very, very upset because of this strike. Well, makes sense because we struck in their land.
Because we struck ballistic missiles out of airplanes. This is magic. This is a ballistic missile
out of an airplane. Yeah, it's a top level
we did a lot of.
Only Russia and China have this ability.
And Israel, apparently.
So
here's the interesting thing. Israel did a lot of things that were first and unexpected. And people like to look at this and they say, oh, you didn't kill all the leadership of Hamas. First of all, it's not confirmed. But the main point is to get to that moment where we have the intelligence on what's happening inside Doha. That's one. Two, we're tracking all the members of Hamas leadership in real time. Three, we have aerial assets that are able to penetrate their air defenses and, by the way, surprise several other countries without them knowing.
Like the U.S.
Like the U.S. who only found out as it was happening. And have the weapons that are able to punch through their defenses. And people call this a failure. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
No, who else?
We
who
hit
else
one building with ballistic missiles out of
accurately. But accurately.
Without even...
Yeah, they claim that they were in a different room doing something else at that specific time and maybe survived this attack. We'll see. As the time passes and I don't see any kind of statement from these leaders, I'm becoming more skeptical if they're still alive or not.
Well, I hope they're not. But to our point, this brings us to this moment in time where we just switched games. We went from one course of action against the Qataris to a whole nother one where it's full-on head-on collision between Israel and Qatar. The Qataris are furious. It's hard to over-exaggerate how angry they are.
I think we did it on purpose. Yeah.
The Qataris are the bad guys. So and Israel says this to them. Prime Minister Netanyahu, by the way, we were at the on the night of the attack, we were at a U.S. Embassy event.
Yeah. You heard Netanyahu coming. He was late because of this attack.
That's historical.
Netanyahu is always late to events, by the way. But he was late to this event because he gave the order for the attack. And he comes and he says, we will pursue all our enemies. We'll pursue all our enemies and we will overcome them. It doesn't matter where they are and when they are, we will get to them. And we do it. We do exactly that, and it's nothing short of incredible. But more so, Israel is calling out the Qatari bluff. And the Qatari bluff is we're this middle of the
neutral
country.
Neutral country.
We come for peace.
We want to make sure that the Palestinians and the Israelis live in peace. But this is not true. This is not true if you track down the amounts of money that was sent from Qatar to the Hamas terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip, even before the 7th of October.
Yes.
It's not true. If you look at the propaganda machine that the Qataris are funding all over the world, which aligns with the propaganda machine of Hamas and basically go hand in hand. And it's not true if you look at the diplomatic attempts to isolate Israel in the international level and in the Arab level, if you look at the interest of Qatar.
We'll get to that in a second. The moment here is it's this big event where we go from having complaints that are made between sides to Israel saying to the Qataris, we've seen behind the screen, we know what you are, and we're going to show the world who you are. You are arch terrorists. You are the people behind Hamas, behind the evil that they spread, behind terrorism and disinformation around the world, and we are calling you out on your bluff, and we're coming to get you. And the Qataris go into panic mode, by the way, over this.
Yeah.
They're furious on the one hand, and they're terrified on the other hand, because Israel showed their weakness. And it's important to note this. And this is why they respond so strongly. They don't respond strongly just because they want to make a show. They respond strongly because we showed how weak they are. We penetrated their defenses. They thought that their money made them untouchable, and we showed that that wasn't the case. And we strike deep in their capital. And after we do that, they go on this parade of, we're going to rally the Arab world. We're going to get all the diplomats and all the politicians we've paid off allegedly, and all the organizations that we bought allegedly, and all the universities that we bought off allegedly too.
All the professors we bought off.
I don't want to be sued for libel, but allegedly they bought off people according to other sources, not us. We would never say such a thing. Anyway.
Yeah, but in practice, this is something funny, okay? Israel is not the only country that struck inside Qatar in the past month.
What?
You know? Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Because
Iran?
the Islamic Republic of Iran launched ballistic missiles
on the US
at the United States base in
I
Qatar.
That's right.
What's the difference?
But did they hit?
No, they were
okay.
intercepted. Okay, so Israel
No,
struck.
I thought there was someone else who struck inside Qatar.
They launched a ballistic missile attack, including dozens of missiles.
But
they were all intercepted.
No, but don't you know that if you have air defense systems and you stop a missile, then you're the aggressor?
Yeah, right.
That's the rule about Israel.
Yeah, true. Exactly. If there's no blood, that doesn't count.
That was a joke, by the way. That's not the case.
But we can go back to 7th of October, and when this terrible thing happened, you remember Qatar's statement?
Wait, just a minute, Toman. So just to say, something has been happening that is beyond dramatic in the Middle East. Beyond dramatic. The Qataris are trying to rally a tsunami of diplomacy against Israel. And they've rallied what they're calling the Arab League, and they've pressured us through international organizations. They're calling in every favor that they've given in decades, and saying we want to come after Israel. We want Israel out of FIFA. We want Israel out of the world, whatever world games are. We want Israel out of the Olympics. We want Israel out of any diplomatic organization and international organization. And they are throwing a lot of money and a lot of weight around to make that happen. And that brings us to this week. To this week, where Secretary of State Rubio visits Israel and then visits Qatar, where Prime Minister Netanyahu speaks boldly against the Qataris, and the Qataris are, they're scrambling. They're scrambling for a solution.
Exactly. Listen, the first thing that the Qataris said was that they threatened not to be the mediator in the Israeli-Hamas negotiation.
Oh no, they've been such effective mediators.
Yeah, exactly.
What will we do without them?
But 2 days later, they already said, nah, we will remain the mediators because basically...
But under our conditions.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But we will remain, but we will be the mediators in bringing this peace. Just a few days later. And what Rubio did in Israel was, first of all, to assure the Jewish state that the United States is still their greatest ally, okay? Despite the fact that Trump didn't like the way that Israel conducted this attack against Hamas leaders, not sure if he didn't like it for real or not for real, or he just had to say it because it actually aligns with his threats about returning all the hostages or you will pay severely. And then like one day after this tweet was aired, Israel struck. So it might be even coordinated between Trump and between the Israelis and Netanyahu. And then the second part of his trip to this region was actually to Qatar. And in his trip to Qatar, they are talks about reaching a huge military cooperation deal between the United States and the Qataris after the Israeli strike, making sure that such a strike will not happen again, reassuring the Qataris that this cooperation with the United States will grant them security and place them in a top level in terms of the military in the Middle East. So, I don't know. It seems very, very orchestrated. Doesn't seem like this was something that the United States just pulled off the hat because of this strike. Maybe it was planned. Maybe it positioned the U.S. at a better location in terms of the negotiations with the Qataris. But this is all speculations. I mean, but it just seems like too smooth of a transition to be coincidental. What do you think?
I think Israel and the U.S. know who Qatar is. And the public is just slow to catch up on it.
Yeah.
And right now, the world press and people around the world are playing catch up on what the governments have already known for a long time. And let's talk about who these Qataris really are. Qatar is an entity that has been paying, we'll start with the terrorists. They've been paying for the activity of Hamas for many, many years. They've been the very willing and hospitable hosts of Hamas leadership in Qatar itself. They've been sending cash to Hamas operatives around the world. Then it goes another layer. They've been financing Al Jazeera, English, Arabic, and other languages, and which is an outlet that is not just a biased news source. It is a source of disinformation about the war taking place between Israel and Hamas. It is a source that intentionally spreads violence and incitement to violence around the world, so much so that Israel, by the way, was not the first, second, or third country in the Middle East to expel Al Jazeera. Most countries around us identify them as a foreign entity that's trying to sow political dissent and what's the word I'm looking for? Instability inside countries.
Yeah, well, but they're also funding the Muslim Brotherhoods, which is also...
Well, they're ideologically aligned.
Yeah, and they're also banned in Egypt. They're also banned in multiple Muslim countries in the region.
So the plot thickens. They're behind that. Then you start talking about what they call soft diplomacy, which is called in plain English, it's called buying people. That's what they do. They buy politicians, they buy universities, they buy news outlets, they buy think tanks around the world. In fact, they do so much of that there are other think tanks that say publicly on their website, we are not owned by the Qataris. And they say that to make a distinction because everyone else is owned by the Qataris. These are people in Washington that work in the U.S. government that shape policies. They are very, very, very meticulous and thought out in buying influence.
Let's talk about this for a second. How do you buy a university?
Well, if you are the sole donor for a university, so much so that they just stopped fundraising from other sources, and we're talking about the tune of hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in total, and that university needs that money to pay its salaries, to send its professors on vacations or whatever they do, to make publications and to recruit more students. But you're the donor, and you're a country, with an Islamic anti-Western agenda. Are there any strings attached? Or could there ever be a scenario where there are not strings attached? I'd say there cannot be.
Yeah. And if you look at the curriculum of many Western universities, you see that they focus on Middle Eastern studies. And in these studies, it's usually one-sided regarding the history related to Israel and the Middle East and the Palestinians.
Yeah. And again, people need to remember, this is not some like democratic force that's saying, I'm like a fan of one specific like philosopher. I love one specific stream in theology. No. This is a radicalizing Islamic movement. This is a small country that is trying to buy influence around the world. This is a country that funds terrorism. By the way, in the same way that the Saudis did 25 years ago. They fund terrorism around the world for various reasons. Some are linear and some are completely counterintuitive that have to do with their need for internal stability. It's too complex for this podcast, but all that to say is that these people spend a ton of money on buying influence. And when they do that, you always know that one day someone's going to come knocking on your door and saying, we've come to collect. And that's exactly what they're trying to do now.
Yeah, exactly. So what's the threats on the table? You said FIFA, so...
Well, FIFA's on the bottom of the list.
So in
to
the
be
end,
banned from the international soccer,
it's
Olympics.
look like nothing gonna happen. It's look like America came after with an ass card in their hand and said
Ace.
Ace
card.
Yeah, and said, listen, relax. Let's close a new defending deal that we defend you better. That stuff like that will not happen again.
I strongly disagree. I'll tell you why, Tomer, because that's only half of the equation. In that sense, in the vertical that is U.S., that is Qatar, U.S., Israel, in that chain of communication, then yes, the U.S. has a lot of sway over the Qataris. I agree with that completely. But what about the other one? The other one where they're able to shape the public opinions of hundreds of millions of people around the world.
True.
That's one. Second, where they're able to shape the universities around Western countries. Third, where they are investors in multiple Western countries. And when you control hundreds of billions of dollars of assets in a country, you don't have to say anything for people to understand where the wind is blowing. Yeah. That's like really the underlying issue here.
But from first moment, Qatar, that everybody catch around the world like this peacemaker that really give to each other. When you're going back to 7th of October, you remember what they said?
Because what do people say about them? No, Qatar's such a complex country. You need to understand their agendas and their motives and stuff like that. Nonsense. No. Qatar is a supporter of terrorism. Qatar on October 7th, before the blood dried out of the people that were, the over 1,000 Israelis that were murdered by Hamas, Qatar says Israel is a source of the aggression, and when they lay down their weapons and stop fighting, we'll have peace and we'll have a resolution. Yeah. They do that on October the 7th.
Yeah,
they don't
exactly.
even. They don't even wait.
The Qatar Ministry of Foreign Affairs statement calls for de-escalation on October 7, when terrorists were roaming in the streets of Israel. Yeah. Okay, Qatar called for de-escalation, holds Israel solely responsible for de-escalation.
Yeah,
okay? Only Israel responsible.
Only Israel.
Yeah, Hamas is not a party.
As terrorists came into our country.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now
then on September 9th, they said that the Israeli strike in Doha. Just now, the strike is targeting Hamas political leaders, and Qatar denounces it completely. Broad Arab Islamic condemnations should follow.
And for now, after this meeting, all I heard there is Israel is bad, Israel is bad, Israel is bad, bad, and bad. But they didn't came out with any agreement.
I'll tell you what, since the 50s, the Muslim countries in the Middle East, and I'd even say beyond the Middle East, also North Africa, they try to create this persona that never really existed. It's called Arab solidarity, or Muslim, or Sunni, or whatever solidarity. And it never really existed in the way people imagine it to. These countries have conflicting agendas. In the same sense that the Qataris themselves might be aligned for a week with the Iranians, they're not ideologically aligned with the Iranians, and they fear them beyond belief. The Qataris fear the Iranians.
Yeah, that's why they have the United States defending them.
Exactly. And it goes the other way around. Qatar connected to the U.S. is something that the Iranians are terrified of. And this map of interest is very, very complex. And you see this clearly in the words of several of the countries who say, Lebanon included, look, Arab solidarity is great. I think we're going to stick with Israel for now.
Yeah.
And they say this.
Yeah, what Lebanon said? Oh, we had enough. We had enough drama for now. We'll see how this normalization goes with Israel.
Remember when it was? What was it? A year ago, where members of the Iraqi government publicly, what was it? It was their foreign minister.
Oh yeah.
He starts screaming on camera, and he goes on this rant of Iran. You're trying to pull us into what you've done, what Israel is, and you and Israel are doing. We've seen what you've done. We've seen what happens to those who go against Israel. We don't want your war. We don't want your conflict. We don't want your version of Islam. Go away and take your violence from us. We want nothing to do with it. Countries are not stupid. They see what's going on with the Qataris. They understand, by the way, that the Qataris and the Iranians are playing a very dangerous game. Very, very dangerous game. Just to give you one example. If tomorrow the U.S. decides that it's had enough for now with the Qataris. And it says, you know what? I think we're going to prevent the Qataris from sending any funds in the U.S. I think, and the U.S. can do this in a drop of a hat, I think we're going to start looking at the assets that the Qataris are holding in the country and start exposing them. Maybe there's a taxation issue here that we need to investigate. That night, Qatar's foreign policy falls into pieces. It gets worse. If Qatar pushes and the U.S. realizes that they need to fight back, they say, you know what? We're not sure that that's the best real estate location for our forces in the Middle East. Let's start pulling out some of our forces that are based in Qatar. You know what happens the next day?
Iran
There is
goes
no Qatar.
into Qatar.
There is no Qatar.
Yeah, they control of all the international gas reservoirs
Exactly.
and every asset that the Qataris have.
Qatar exists today at the mercy of the American government, at the protection and in the shadow of the American government.
Wow.
Without that, they are easy prey for any other country in this region. And in that sense, they are complex because they really need that protection. And at the same time, they can't be perceived as only being sort of like the servants of the American overlords.
No, they have their interests and they want to get their power whenever they can get there because they cannot get their power from military. They need to get it from the diplomatic arena, from influence in universities, in the public arena, in the media, and also sponsoring Muslim Brotherhoods, Hamas, and other bad guys.
Yeah, so let's refocus on what Qatar is about to do. So Qatar, they go down this route after the Doha attack, and they say, we're going against Israel in diplomatic chains, we're pulling together all these countries, and we're gonna rally, hurrah, we'll show the Israelis.
Oh, we'll see what happens with that at the UN General Assembly.
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be a recognition of a Palestinian state.
Well, it was happening before Qatar was involved in it.
I know.
It was happening with the help of multiple European countries. Very big.
Canada, France
included, yeah.
The UK.
Yeah, so it was already in the making. The Arab League thing is sort of falling apart. But then the U.S. is, I think, a really big piece that needs to fall into place. The U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, just traveled there, and he goes with a message, and the message is, look, we understand you're unhappy about what happened with Israel. Let's just ignore that for a second. What we're willing to do is to sign a bigger defense pact with you. And in that defense pact, we're giving you more weapons. We're going to park more forces in your country. We're going to make sure that you guys are taken care of for now, and now go back to behaving right. And then the Qataris do. Almost immediately, overnight, they say, look, as you were just saying, we're going to go back and I think we want to mediate. I think we want to be part of this conversation. Yeah. Look, we were a little upset, so we're going to pretend that things are not back to normal. Things are back to normal already.
Of course they won't. Let's give them to normalize Hamas as an entity. And Hamas is a terror organization, and somehow they talk about, and Qatar give this feel that Hamas is equal to Israel, that Hamas is a terror, it's not a terror organization, it's, I don't know, a government or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's break these claims. So we say that the claim is that Qatar will retaliate. We're saying, no, they will not retaliate. What they do is something that they are doing regardless, which is influencing the international public opinion against Israel, which they have been doing already, which is making Hamas a normal actor and not just a terrorist organization in the ceasefire agreement, in the negotiations between Israel and Hamas, which they're doing anyway. But we don't see any kind of kinetic activity, any kind of military retaliation against Israel.
But it doesn't have to be military. If you're at the point where Israeli athletes can't travel anywhere in the world and can't participate in any sports match, and when we're kicked out of FIFA, and when we're kicked out of other sports unions around the world, and when other countries that have or their own agenda or just align with the Qatari agenda, when they start promoting Palestinian statehood or withdrawing from Israeli deals, or saying look, we no longer have a financial incentive in buying weapons from you or whatever you're buying from us, that becomes a problem. Qatar has a lot of cash. Yeah. They're a very, very wealthy country. And they think, and this is important, they think that they can throw their money around enough to affect Israel. But here's the big story here. The big story is financial. And in the financial story, me and you were sitting in an event just the other week, and we had just bombed Qatar. And at the same time, the Houthis in a very unrelated way, of course, there was no Qatari influence on this. The Houthis launch a missile against Israel. We're sitting in an event. We open up our phones. The headline is, Israeli stock market goes up. On the day, you remember this?
I remember it. Yeah.
On the day where Israel strikes and opens war against another very, 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 very well-pocketed, let's call it very affluent country in the Middle East. On that day, when that's happening, while a ballistic missile from Yemen is flying into Israel, the stock markets in Israel jump. They jump not because of Israeli money, because of international funds flowing into Israel as a show of trust of our economy and our stock market. And that leads us to our partner for today's podcast. And our partner today is wiseisrael. Let me pull up the domain and make sure I get it right. wisemoneyisrael.com/TBN. wisemoneyisrael.com/TBN. These are people that are, by the way, licensed. I went and checked my facts. They're licensed in Israel and in the U.S., and it's a very, very safe way to invest into Israel. And let me tell you something. If you look at our pension funds and you look at the stock market in Israel, it miraculously keeps climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing. There's no natural way to explain it. It's just like, it is amazing. And in that sense, this is a good way to invest into the Israeli economy, to help boost the Israeli economy, and also to turn a profit on your investment portfolio. Now, again, let's make a disclaimer. You never know if the stock market goes up or down, or if investments go up and down, but the trend has been amazing. The trend has been positive, and we're happy to partner with wisemoneyisrael.com/TBN. If you go there, by the way, it helps us. It helps grow this channel, and it helps people invest into the state of Israel.
Yeah, exactly. And if you believe in the Bible, believe in God's prophecies for the end times, for the nation of Israel, it's a good bet to put your money with God's biblical prophecies for the later days, basically. Yeah. And you know them personally also, the heads of this organization.
Yes.
So I've been getting, text asking, so are they legit and everything?
They are legit.
I always refer them to Mati because you know them, personally.
I've known them for many years. Basis. They have an amazing reputation from many, many clients over many, many years. And I think that says all you need to hear. Mm-hmm. It's people who are reputable, who do it well and do it consistently. Now back to Qatar.
Yeah, definitely, Tomer. So let's do another claim and see what's up with that. The next claim is the Arab world is united and acting against Israel. True or false, Mati?
Absolutely false. The Arab world is not united. The idea of an Arab cohesive league that works together is non-existent at this point. They understand that there are winners and losers in this game, and that Qatar does not currently have the upper hand, definitely not when it comes to using actual power in this part of the world. Mm-hmm. The power is in the hands of the Americans, the power is in the hands of Israel, and other countries in this region that have had enough of destabilization and enough of internal war. Lebanon's a great example. Egypt is a great example. Jordan is a great example. They look at the...
Syria doesn't exist yet.
Syria, if Syria was a country, they would feel the same way. They look at this and they say, we look at what Qatar has to offer. We are uninterested completely. Mm-hmm. Now, outwardly, they'll say, oh, yes, solidarity, we stand with you. But in reality, in actions, absolutely not.
Got it. Okay, next claim. The IDF ground move is stalled at the moment.
Also not true.
Completely not true, Mati.
But you should report. You just reported on this earlier.
Exactly. No, this is like so far-fetched from the truth. What's happening now in the Gaza Strip is that you have more than 300,000 Palestinian civilians that evacuated from Gaza City to safe humanitarian zones, southern, in Khan Yunis, in El Mawasi, in other places. In these places, they are receiving humanitarian aid, receiving shelter, receiving food from international aid organizations and from Israel.
Yes.
Okay? And at the same time, the IDF artillery units are destroying any kind of Hamas infrastructure above and below ground, including aerial strikes, including targeted bombings of high-rise buildings. I'm sure that you guys have seen the images from Gaza. You have these, tall buildings that are being collapsed. These buildings are used by Hamas terrorists. They place cameras on top of these buildings. They place snipers. They place their command centers to make sure that they can observe the movement of our troops and know when to activate the IEDs, the explosives that they have been planting for many months in many streets inside the Gaza Strip, because according to the intelligence information the amount of anti-tank rockets and sniper guns and these kinds of weapons is very low in the Hamas hands. But what they do have is explosive devices, IEDs, mainly because they collected these explosives from debris and missiles and rockets that the IDF fired in this war, and they did not exploded and were remained in the field. And then they collect them, reuse them, and make them into IEDs. Yeah. They operate with cameras, with cell phones that like remote detonate these explosives. But we have been hearing reports just in the last few days of tanks, Israeli tanks, in the city center of Gaza City, that the residents are seeing movement of tanks inside the city. And we are having, 3 divisions, right, Tomer, that are already operating there. And around, 130,000 reservists that were mobilized. That's like not a total new 170, but combined that are operating in the Gaza Strip. So it's a lot of troops.
130,000 reservists in the Gaza Strip, or
no, all together.
No, 130 reservists recruited to allow the operation in the Gaza Strip.
Yes, to allow the operation. The main soldiers that are operating in the Gaza Strip are mostly regulars, meaning 18 to 21 are mostly equipped and young guys, not us, over the hill reservists.
Listen, we met, because we've been in Judea and Samaria and also outside of the country recently. We bumped into several of these soldiers. These are young men, 20, 21-year-olds, who for over 2 years, well, not over 2 years, for almost 2 years have been fighting a war. And when you think about the level of military training that these people have experienced and the level of military combat experience that they've experienced, it's more than, in my generation, your generation, more than people achieved in a lifetime.
Some of them were in high school when 7th of October happened.
Yeah. No, but there are people now who went into the army, let's say in the end of 2023.
When they were 18.
When they were 18 years old, and they've been fighting a war since then. And some of them in these infantry units, the level of skill that they've reached as a fighting force is unbelievable. And then this goes into this question, and I want to delay on the question of the IEDs, because people often ask the question, why is the IDF destroying buildings inside the Gaza Strip? And it's used a lot by Israel haters around the world. You said IEDs. Let's throw some numbers here. There's barely a building in the Gaza Strip, barely a building that isn't booby-trapped. There's barely a building. And especially the tall buildings have sniper nests in them, they have anti-tank units in them, and then they have bombs in them. And the ones that don't have bombs in them have tunnels with bombs underneath them. And then when the IDF blows up those tunnels, they collapse the foundations of those buildings.
You can see that because when the IDF is exploding a building, you see most of the times in these images secondary explosions, meaning that there is the explosion from the missile, and then it detonates like a weapon storage facility, a pile of rockets.
Or a UN building.
Or, or UN.
In many
usually
cases,
it's UN building.
In many cases, you'll see the smoke come out just next to a UN facility.
Yeah, because the tunnel is connected between the United Nations building, a mosque, a school, a hospital.
They've really missed out on an opportunity to go into construction, the UN. They're really, really good at hiding construction. Anyway, back to our point. So this is going on the ground. People need to understand the extent of the bombs that are used. I was just in Jenin the other week, and we're talking about a tiny physical area. The IDF had to remove over 1,000 IEDs in a 7-month campaign that they've been fighting this one small area.
And it's very sad because in order to remove IEDs from a road, you basically need to bulldoze the entire road. And I mean, it's not good for the infrastructure because it destroys it.
That's one way to say it.
No, right?
Not good for the infrastructure. I mean, yes, when every road and every pothole and every building and every wall has IEDs in it, you have to bulldoze your way through the city or you're going to be losing soldiers left and right. And that's what's going on in the Gaza Strip right now, is the IDF soldiers that are fighting there are battled, hardened soldiers. Think about these people. These are people that have done 3, 4, 5 rounds in Gaza, and the special forces that are fighting there have been fighting nonstop. They're careful. They understand how Hamas works. They're not walking into buildings knowing full well that the building could fall on their head a second later. So when they enter, they say, fine, there's the ID, go get the bulldozers. Go get the bomb squad. We want to bring the building down because we don't want to be blown into pieces inside this building.
Yeah,
that's what's happening.
Yeah, and moreover, like people ask, how can they control these IDs, these cameras, if there's no electricity? But what Hamas is doing is they are connecting so-called green solar panels to their command centers. And then what you see from satellite images is you see a building with solar panels on top of it. And that can be an indicator for a Hamas command center because that provides electricity for the tunnels underneath. This is another way that Hamas keeps operating in this war, even without conditions, without electricity, without, the normal infrastructure of a city. But we need to remember that Hamas has been preparing for this ground maneuver of the IDF into Gaza City for many, many months. The IDF operated in some neighborhoods of the city in the early stages of this war, but then withdrew from it. And then in the ceasefire agreements that we had throughout these 22 months, the civilian Palestinian population were sent back north into Gaza City to reside there. And since then, Hamas has been issuing statements and announcements to the Palestinian people not to evacuate their homes, to stay in the danger zones instead of moving south to the humanitarian areas.
Well, they shoot them when they try to enter into some of the zones.
And that's the next stage. And
you
the
say
IDF,
encourage, they're killing them.
I'm going to bring us to the subject, but how Qatar is connected to the ground maneuver?
I'm so happy you asked that.
How is it connected?
It's connected on so many levels. The Qataris funded Hamas Gaza. The Qataris hosted the leadership of Hamas in Doha. The Qataris are the ones who kept these people both funded and safe for years inside Qatar. And they do so knowing full well that everyone in the West knows where these people are, and they're doing it to spite them and to show what their true intentions are. So when Israel attacks Qatar and says we're coming to eliminate the leadership of Hamas, the leadership of Hamas were not on a vacation in Doha, Qatar. That's their home base. They feel comfortable in Qatar. They have for many, many years. The Qataris made sure they felt comfortable and supported. Now, it's of course a little more complex than that, but that's the basics of the story, is that they continuously allow these people to remain inside Qatar.
And the bad part about this is it separates the leadership of Hamas, those that make the decisions regarding ending this war or releasing the hostages, from the suffering of the Palestinian people and the middle to lower level terrorists that are still fighting the IDF in the Gaza Strip.
Yes.
So the IDF can increase its battles, its military pressure on Hamas in Gaza, while the leadership are drinking Mai Tais in 5-star hotels in Qatar.
Muslims would never drink alcohol.
I'm sure that the leadership of Hamas will make an exception for this.
They are honest and God-fearing men.
Yeah, well,
how dare you say such a thing about them?
Well, maybe I don't know. Anyway.
No, I'm joking.
So,
all evidence points to the exact opposite. They're godless men who do horrific things.
Yeah.
Horrific things.
Yeah, so this is
and they're by the way, these
yeah.
men, by the way, are the reason. And this is where the machine gets complex. The fact that the Qataris keep this engine of Hamas going, they feed them, they host them, they keep them, operational. They support them ideologically. They pay for their PR campaigns. That machine is what prevents the hostages from coming home in Israel. That machine is what prevents Israel from ending the war in the Gaza Strip. Because those fat and lazy and corrupt Hamas leaders who were meeting in Doha, Qatar, they're the same men that keep the war going inside the Gaza Strip. They're the same men who never stand with their people, but are always happy to say, we fight till the death, but they're never the ones to fight.
Exactly.
They're never the ones to send their kids into battle. They're the ones who send the innocent civilians of Gaza, or partially innocent civilians of Gaza, into battle ahead of them. Yeah. Those are the people we're dealing with. And the Qataris say, no, these guys are not terrorists. These guys, they're freedom fighters. These guys, they're diplomats. How dare you hurt the diplomats? Meanwhile,
how can you hurt the delegation for the mediation for the ceasefire agreement in this war? That's how they create the image of the Israeli strike against leaders of terrorists. Imagine that Osama bin Laden was struck in Afghanistan, and then the Afghan National government
How dare
go
you?
to the United States, how dare you strike this diplomat, this freedom fighter that is staying in our country? How dare you do this? You know, does that make sense?
What a violation of sovereignty.
Exactly.
How dare you? What a violation of our sovereignty.
Yeah, let's create a national meeting and condemn you for doing that.
Shame on you.
Exactly. It's like unheard of.
Anyway.
So yeah, no, I'm just
No, back to our point. We're fighting a war that the people need to be reminded of. It is a proxy war. And the Qataris might not be able to field tanks or send out the bombers themselves, but they are the ones pulling the trigger with their funds, with their PR machine, with their control of both politicians and educational institutes. They are the ones perpetuating violence and suffering in this part of the world, together with the Iranians. They're no better than they are. They just do it with a suit and a tie and a more polite attitude about it. But they're still just as bad. They're still just as dangerous. They're still just as much of a threat that needs to be eliminated. And the fact that they've been able to penetrate Western institutions to such an effective degree is terrifying. These men are doing, they're doing things to Western countries. The U.S. is primary on that list. That is horrific.
Yeah.
They've been able to usurp and take over the minds of people in the public, and those people don't even know they're being controlled by the Qataris. It's terrifying.
And they're a tiny country with vast influence around the world. Exactly. So, how can our viewers pray for the situation, Mati?
Pray for wisdom for the leaders. Okay. This last sort of exchange of communication, where Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, Secretary of State Rubio for the U.S., and also President Trump, they've just been so bold about what is the right thing to do and who the Qataris truly are. You need to lift that veil and point to them and say, this is what in reality is happening here. That takes a level of boldness that we need to continue praying for. That's one. Two, pray for the people of Qatar to do the right thing and their leadership to do the right thing, and pray for the leadership of Hamas to be no longer existent. and that's on one hand.
To meet judgment.
But but to reach an agreement quickly that ends the conflict in Gaza and returns every last hostage home. And at this point, I'd also say pray for the supernatural protection of the hostages. These young people, old people, these Israeli innocent civilians have been in captivity for over 700 days now. They need to come home. They need to be home. We're at an event just earlier this week where one of our colleagues was,
young woman.
Young woman was, we're talking about the fact that she's still waiting for her husband to come back to Israel, You watch the images of these hostages. Everything else pales in comparison to this topic. They need to be returned back. They have not seen the Red Cross. They have not seen doctors. No one knows their whereabouts except for Hamas, of course, and they use this to torment the people of Israel. They are the violators of international law. They are the terrorists. They are the deceivers, and we need to call them out on their bluff, and their Qatari overlords and sponsors need to be called out on their bluff and their deception too.
Exactly. No, it's very important to remind everybody because it's been forgotten. Israel was attacked by Hamas terrorists on October 7th. On October 6th, one day before that, we had a ceasefire between Israel and the Gaza Strip. They violated it. They attacked us, murdered us, and took hundreds into the Gaza Strip as hostages still there. What would you do and what would you want your country to do if you were kidnapped to another country? Would you want your country to fight for you, to defend you? And in the meantime, your country is attacked by 7 other fronts at the same time. Ballistic missiles over Paris, for example. What would you want France to do? Let me know in the comments, okay? Tomer, you think you have anything else to add?
No, I'm good.
So thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming all the way from Germany to the studio here in Jerusalem, my friend. And keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem. We'll see you again next time in another TBN Israel podcast.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.